I think Dr. Ankita, let's start because a few of the participants have joined, but I don't see the turnout. So maybe they'll join while we are here. So,
Okay.
so a very warm welcome to all the participants, and thank you, Dr. Ankita, for accepting this invitation. And I'm sorry, or I would like to apologize for for shifting the date because there were some unavoidable circumstances. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Ankita. And before giving her introduction, I would like to introduce a bit about our company, Genomics, so that you all know that what we do. And if you have any doubts and any questions, you can just let us know. Also, uh, uh, during the presentation, I would like everybody to, you can raise your virtual hands. There is an option on your left hand side of the bar that you can raise your virtual hands, and you can also write your questions in the Q&A box. We can unmute you, or we can take your questions either in the middle of the talk, as if Dr. Ankita is comfortable with it, or maybe after the talk. So at the end of the session. So now I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if you can see it. So can you see my slides, Ankita? Ankita, are my slides visible?
Yes, Diksha, I can.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much, Ankita, and thank you so much, participants, for joining in. We are here to discuss about or hear Dr. Ankita's session on sequencing tails. And before doing that, let's have a small introduction about Genomics, our company. We have been incubated at an NSR cell in the incubator at IIM Bangalore, and we have recently also got incubated at Institute of Life Sciences at TBT BioNest Bio Incubator. We are a bioinformatics company. To be more precise, we provide bioinformatics services and solutions for various life science researchers and healthcare industries, include diagnostic labs and hospitals as well. So our main competency is to provide data analysis services. If you or your friends or colleagues or boss or PI or any other person is looking for any sort of data analysis services, biological data analysis services, just let us know. We'll help you analyze your data, and not just analyze your data, we'll provide the interpretation as well. So we pride ourselves with making sense of your data and help your data reach its fullest potential. And apart from that, we are also conducting a lot of training programs, short and long-term internships, webinars and workshops that we regularly conduct. And most of the because we are working on the field of genomics, so many of our courses are mainly associated with genomics field. So recently we had concluded one internship program on NGS analysis as well. We have conducted programs on structural bioinformatics, basic bioinformatics as well. And we also conduct, we have a plan of conducting a small course or session where we'll be teaching you the different tools of lab. The clinical research is one course where we are also interested in. If there is anybody who would like to have a to enroll for that, feel free to let us. Feel free to inform us. You can always call us anytime, mail us, or you can write to us, and we'll give you all the sorts of information that we have. If you have any concerns and issues, we'll be happy to take them. Now it's time to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Ankita Singh, who is not just a molecular biologist, she's a genomics expert and she's into clinical cancer research. She did her PhD from CSR IJIB in the field of cancer biology. Later, she has worked as a project scientist for a short stint exploiting the NGS tools, but quickly moved to ICMR's NICPR after earning the prestigious postdoctoral fellowship. There, she has tried to understand the epigenomic variations among Indian cancer patients. Then she has moved back to IGI as a project scientist, is now actively involved in clinical cancer research. So I welcome Ankita. I'm so glad that we can have you again on this platform. And in short, she's a cancer biology researcher, and she's having experience of over a decade in working in genomics, molecular biology, and translational research. Today, she's going to talk about sequencing technologies. Wow. So basically, what all are the different sequencing technologies that we are using or we were using a long back? Where do we actually stand today? and what exactly is the future? What is the difference between next generation sequencing, NGS platforms basically, and cellular sequencing? What is actually long read sequencing? So, and how, if the sequencing chemistry has grown, if we have different types of sequencing tools or sequencing platforms available, do we have the relevant bioinformatics as well? So she's going to touch upon all these topics, and now I'm stopping the screen share. Ankita, I'm making you the presenter now. You can share your screen and you can share your presentation as well. And
thank you,
yeah,
Diksha. Thank you so much for having me again on the portal. And I would like this to be an interactive session. I'll touch upon all the topics that Disha has mentioned, and I'll be very happy to know if any of you have any questions developing in the area, you want to plan an experiment, you want suggestions on that. I'll be happy to take them as well, and I'll try to address each question to the best of my knowledge. I'll start screen share. So yeah, just a second.
so during the course of the webinar, participants, you can always raise your virtual hands and write your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be very happy to take them. Even if you have any, if you want to directly speak to the speaker, we can unmute you and you can directly speak to the speaker and ask your question.
Sure. I don't think I'll be able to see the chat because it is a full screen presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so you are free to interrupt me. Just raise your voice or just speak up, and I'll wait. Yeah, I'll stop and try to answer your question there.
Yeah, your slides are visible. Can you make them full screen?
Yeah, I have made them full screen. Is
No,
it fine?
No, you're there. No. Are you selecting the whole computer screen or just the slides? If you're selecting maybe you can,
the whole screen.
I can't see them full screen yet.
Okay.
Share them again.
Just a second.
The complete screen, computer screen, something like that. That option is there.
Screen sharing. Entire screen. Window. Okay. Is it visible now?
Just a second. Yeah, the PPT is visible. Just make it full screen.
Visible? Full screen it is.
Maybe it's taking some. There's a lag of a couple of seconds.
Okay.
I don't see, because I don't see it full screen yet.
Others also?
Participants, can you see that full screen? Can you write that in the Q&A box if you can see it full screen? Because I can't see it full screen. Participants, can you see the, no, it's not in full screen.
How do I do it now?
Are you selecting the entire screen, right?
Yes, entire screen. Yes, entire screen. Just a second. Let me do one thing. Go down, go up. Make it full screen. Skip. Here you go, and now entire screen. The sharing option is disabled.
No, you are the presenter.
But it is not highlighting now. It's gray.
Let me just figure this out. Ankita, can you join back again? Is it okay?
Yes. Sure, let me try that. Let me do that.
So just hold on a few seconds, participants. There's some technical glitch here. Let's just figure that out. Otherwise, I'll share the screen for you.
You have the slides as well.
Yeah, I have your slides. So try it from your end. That is always better. If it is not working out, I'll share the screen.
Sure, I'll quit and then I'll rejoin.
Yeah. Just rejoin once and then I hope it will work.
Yes.
Have you joined back?
Yes, Diksha, I'm back. But again, it is gray.
Mm,
I can't share. No, it's not giving me the sharing rights.
Now?
No.
Now you are the presenter, Ankita.
Put my slides. You put my slides.
Okay, fine. I'll do it. Now again, one can't present, right?
Hmm. It's gray only. It's not actively.
Okay. Still right?
Hmm.
Okay, no problem. No worries. I'll share your.
Switch off and switch on that mode, presenter.
Yeah, I have made you the presenter. You are the presenter.
Okay.
You are the co-host and the presenter. That's okay. Just try it once more. Otherwise, I'll present your slides. Don't worry.
Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, something
Full
is.
screen it is now.
It's not full screen yet.
Now?
No. There's a lag of a couple of seconds, but I don't see it full screen. Just hold on for a second. Maybe it's.
Hmm. You put it then. We are running out of time
Yeah.
unnecessarily.
Okay. I'll share it.
Hmm.
So I'm now making myself as a presenter and sharing slides. Can you all see my screen and slides?
But it is not entire screen here also.
Now?
No.
Oh, I'm previously when I was doing it, was it full screen?
No. Then also it was this small tab only.
Maybe there's some other issue then. You can't see my full
Okay, then
screen?
let me only handle it.
Okay,
No.
maybe then you. I think there is some
Yeah,
technical.
then let me do it. Hmm.
But one of the participants saying he can see in the full screen mode. Okay,
Maybe in our
maybe there is a time lag where it is coming in the full screen.
okay. So without taking any more time of you guys, I'll just start. Just pause me whenever you have a question in mind, right? So I'll be taking you through to the basics of genome sequencing, what all options are available with us in this modern era of next generation sequencing. So what is DNA sequencing actually? So most of us, although are aware, but still I'll let everybody know that when we determine the sequence, the fashion in which a sequence is arranged on a template of DNA, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, which we commonly call as ATCG, in a piece of DNA, when we determine those sequences in a sequential order, that we call as DNA sequencing. DNA sequencing has evolved over multiple years now, more than I will say 50 years. The most of the first method was the Maxim Gilbert sequencing, which you all must have read earlier in our BScs and MScs. But that was not a very robust method. Later on, the developments kept happening in the at a great pace, I would say, and Sanger sequencing came into picture. So Frederick Sanger, with his colleagues, he developed this method of sequencing
Ankita,
in the year 1977.
Ankita, are you changing your slides?
Hello.
Are you changing your slides?
I am on the Sanger sequencing. I'm on the third slide.
No, we can't. That is what we can't see the slide change, the changing of the slides. So okay, forget it. Let me present. I'll try to.
Fine.
Yeah, just. I'm so
Fine.
sorry, participants, for this technical glitch. I'm not sure why is this happening. So I am on my full screen mode. I'll change the slide. Can you see my change the second slide?
Yes.
What is DNA sequencing?
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, so DNA sequencing, as I just mentioned. So we can go to the third slide, Diksha.
I'm just muting myself.
So Frederick Sanger was the person who developed this method of Sanger sequencing in the year 1977, for which he was also awarded a Nobel in the year 1980. This method, we also known as the chain termination method, and it uses a dideoxy sequencing method, or we call it an enzymatic method, to determine the sequences on the chain of DNA. This was one of the most widely used DNA sequencing method for almost 40 years, which also led to the successful completion of the well-known Human Genome Project in 2003. Although in the Human Genome Project, apart from Sackville sequencing, the next generation sequencing modes were also applied in towards the later years. However, it began with performing Sanger sequencing initially. This method is based, Diksha back. Yeah. So this method is based on the chain termination method by the use of dideoxynucleotides, which are special, or I would say these are modified DNTPs. Next slide, please, Diksha. So what is a dideoxynucleotide? It is an artificial molecule which is generated in the lab and which lacks a hydroxyl group at the 3' carbon of the ribose sugar. As you can see the difference between a DDNTP and a DNTP. So when there is no hydroxyl group at the 3' carbon of the ribose sugar, a fresh DNTP cannot come and attach. So what happens is, next slide, Diksha. So this is a brief methodology that how a Sanger sequencing is processed. So we have a primer sequence which is complementary to the template. This primer sequence is designed in such a way that it is universal for a lot of templates, like we have for the cDNA synthesis and all. This goes and attach. Then we have 4 different reaction mixtures. Nowadays, the technique has, however, advanced, where each DDNTP is labeled with a fluorescent dye. Earlier, this used to be a radioactive method, but now we have advanced this to a fluorescent label method. So a DDTTP will be like orange color, DDCTP would be fluorescently tagged with a blue color, and so on. So all the 4 DDNTPs are labeled with a different fluorochrome, and the DNA is incubated with them. Now, what will happen is when the primer extension is happening, along with this DNTP, we also add some of the normal NTP so that some extension is also possible. Then as soon as a DDNTP is incorporated into the DNA strand, the fluorescent label emits a color which is recorded by the detector, and that is taken as whatever base pair it is, ATGC, whatever, depending on the fluorophore which was identified by the instrument. This is how we build a sequence when we do Sanger sequencing. This is one of the most basic methods, most least expensive method. However, it is quite time taking and expensive also when compared to the faster evolving technology. So very few labs are now using Sanger sequencing. This is mostly done to identify very small stretches of DNA, and very large DNAs are not suitable for this type of sequencing as there is a higher error. They are prone to higher error rate. Next slide, Diksha. After the Sanger sequencing, we come to the next generation sequencing era. Here, multiple technologies came in, but the core concept remains the same. They all try to be high throughput. The difference lies in the efficiency of the instrument and the read depth that they provide and the amount of data that they provide us. Next slide, Diksha. Thank you. So here is a general overview of the next generation sequencing technology, that what are the basic events that we employ to achieve, to determine the sequencing. So first step is library preparation. Second is the amplification of those prepared fragments, and ultimately we sequence. So library preparation part incorporates that we have the input DNA or the RNA. RNA is also converted into cDNA before sequencing. The exceptions are small RNAs and all, where also we convert them into cDNA, but they are of shorter length. In case of longer DNA stretches, or longer RNAs, we fragment the DNA and the DNA into readable sizes depending on the platform that we are using. For example, if we are using a Illumina platform, which is one of the most commonly used platform across the world, there we usually fragment DNA up to a size of 350 base pair depending on the application. For example, for whole genome sequencing, we have a fragment length of 350 base pairs. For chip sequencing, we have a fragment length of 250 base pairs. For cut and tag, we have 150 base pairs. So that is how we decide on the application basis. They have set protocols that what is the best fragmentation site to generate the best sequencing results. After fragmentation, and this fragmentation can be done by two methods, either sonication or ultrasonic waves, or by enzymatic digestion. So for doing libraries, like when we do study the epigenome by methylation studies, so we use MNase enzyme to digest the fragments. However, in others, we use either the Coveris instrument, which uses high-speed ultrasonic waves to fragment DNA of specific size. We can also use a sonicator, normally available in all the labs, which are used to disrupt the cells. That can also be used to sonicate or fragment your DNA. But that requires a considerable amount of standardization before you set on the final experiment. Once we have the fragmented DNA in our hands, back Diksha, back. Okay, you stay here. Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So then here we have end repair. After fragmentation, we make our DNA segments or fragments compatible to the sequencer. Now the sequencer has the same technology any DNA in the world you bring to it. So to make our DNA, be it from any application, we have to help it align and modify in such a way that the sequencer can identify it. So for that, we do end repairing. That is, we make all of them blunt ended and we attach a tail to the 3' end of the DNA sequence or the DNA template. To this A' end is attached the adapter. This adapter is complementary to the adapters which are there on the sequencing flow cell. So this adapter ligation is a very crucial step, and this is the one which will ensure that your libraries are compatible for sequencing on the chosen platform or not. If there is an error here, you won't be able to have a good result and the experiment would fail. After we do the adapter ligation, we check this fragmented library for the quality controls. That can be done by a bioanalyzer, or that can be done by doing a PCR to validate. So as I told you, there are three methods: sonication, nebulization, enzyme digestion. Nebulization is the Coveris method only that I told. Sonication is the normal sonicators that are available in the lab, and enzyme digestion in case when you are doing methylation studies and all, bisulfite sequencing and etc. So in just I have explained you whatever is mentioned on the slide. Okay. So at the end, what we get from library preparation are short DNA fragments with platform-specific adapters. Any questions so far? Okay. So Diksha, next slide. Thank you. After the library preparation, that is after we have sequencer compatible DNA fragments, two approaches can be are more the widely used ones which are used for sequencing. We have to this is single molecule or single DNA fragment modifications that we have done. Now we want to gain confidence on this. Whatever the sequencer produces, we want to have confidence on it. So what we'll do is we make multiple copies, the clonal, which we call as clonal amplification in terms of NGS. We make multiple copies of a single DNA molecule. which can be done either by emulsion PCR method, wherein PCR happens with inside a bead, a oil droplet, or we can follow the bridge amplification method, which happens in the Illumina platform. So the purpose of doing clonal amplification is to have millions of copies of a single DNA fragment that we have edited and made compatible, so that the error rate could be determined accurately and there are very less chances of false positives and false negatives. So either emulsion PCR is done, that is oil in water based, oil droplet is there, and the DNA fragment goes inside. A mixture of polymerase and all PCR components lies inside that oil bead, and our DNA is multiply amplified. So one bead will have only one type of fragment, and hence we assume that in sequencing result we will get only one type of sequence, which should be similar for all the DNA that was processed here. In bridge amplification, this happens on a solid slide-like surface, which a microscopic slide-like surface. On that microscopic slide-like surface, there are trillions, millions and trillions of primers attached, which are compatible to the adapter that we attach to our DNA molecule. That attaches to the complementary part, and a linear amplification happens on that glass side. Again, there one, like you can see A, B and C. So A is one cluster representing one type of DNA molecule, B is another, C is another. So one cluster, one fragment and one sequence bead happens here. Is the fundamentals of doing clonal amplification, which is more or less followed by all the NGS platforms. Next slide, Diksha. I don't know if it is visible clearly, but I will tell you. Okay. Now we go on to the sequencing method. What happens after the clonal amplification? So whatever way we have amplified, that is again platform specific. Then we go to the sequencing of our libraries. Sequencing can be achieved by the most of the market available tools. They perform on the three broad methodologies: the pyrosequencing, sequencing by ligation, and reversible dye terminators. So pyrosequencing is something where a pyrophosphate is released. The chemistry is designed in such a manner that a sequence incorporation of nucleotides happens and a pyronucleotide is attached along. This is also labeled with luminescent probe. So when a pyrophosphate is released, it emits luminescence, which is recorded by the instrument, and it identifies the nucleotide attached with it. Then we go to sequencing. The other method, pyrosequencing, is very costly. It is very less followed, and it is a bit, I would say, less user-friendly methodology. So a lot of people are not doing pyrosequencing these days. The other method is sequencing by ligation. So what happens here is that we introduce oligonucleotide probes, which are again fluorescently labeled. They go and bind to the DNA sequences that we have prepared, and again the fluorescence is captured by the instrument. Sequencing by ligation is usually followed by this. So pyrosequencing you can find on the 454 Roche platform, and to the best of my knowledge, it has now been discontinued, at least in India. Sequencing by ligation, you can find it in solid platforms and reversible dye terminators. This is the most widely, commonly user-friendly way available, which most of us are using in India and abroad. So what happens here is that they incorporate reversible dye terminators. So when after the clonal amplification, here this technology uses bridge amplification method. So after bridge amplification, again a primer is attached to the sequencing end, to 5' end or to the 3' end of the DNA, and the process of DNTPs starts. So a batch of, or a pool of DNTPs, a mixture of ATGC, differently labeled, each DNTP differently labeled with each with a fluorophore, is made to flow on that that cluster that we have generated in clonal amplification. So whatever is compatible, whichever, so for example, C goes and incorporates into the DNA strand. So this is called sequencing by synthesis method also, along with reversible determination technology. This is also called a single synthesis by sequencing. So for example, a C has gone and incorporated, and then it emits a fluorescence which is recorded by the detector. After this step is complete, this C will be, the detector there will be cleaved off and a new base can come and join in. So this is how the chain will keep on building, and we can sequence long stretches of DNA or RNA with this technology. So we can go up to sequencing of 500 bases using this method. Yeah, so different platforms are available using different with a slight modification to achieve better resolution and better depth. 454 sequencing, which employs the pyro sequencing approach, is available. The life technologies approach, ion torrent, is available. Ion torrent is suitable. It is an economical method. It is suitable when you have smaller genomes to understand, and when you have targeted panels, then this is the suggested one. Then we have the Illumina platform. Illumina platform is the most widely used across the world. It is very user friendly, and they are dominating the market somehow now. The other one is Pacific Biosciences. So Illumina platform uses the sequencing by synthesis or the reversible determinator technology for their sequencing products. A maximum that you can do by all these methods, by Helicos, by Pacific Biosciences, everything is up to 500, 450 to 500 bases of DNA. So these many long fragments at a stretch, you can have the sequence. However, yes, whole genome sequencing and everything is also afforded by them, but they are like, you have to increase the depth, you have to do multiple, you might have to do multiple types of sequencing to have a coverage of the whole genome. Yeah. Next slide, Diksha. So how do I choose my platform? So as I mentioned earlier also, that depending on the read length and your application, depending on the number of reads that you want, the read depth that you want, you can choose your platform. For example, smaller genomes, ion torrent is the best. For doing your longer genomes or larger genomes for high throughput data, Illumina is one of the preferred technologies. Or yeah, so this is how whatever experiment you are planning, that will help you decide at which platform you should go to. So why is NGS revolutionary? So NGS has brought high speed not only to the genome sequencing and personal medicine, but it has also changed the way we do genome research. So now most of the genomics lab, as soon as I have a question on understanding the genome organization, or even even in clinics these days, when they want to go for personalized genome, what they do, they sequence the genome of the patient or the person. Yeah. So this is the revolution that NGS has brought in along with it. So any questions so far to the NGS part? Question and answer. Okay. I can't see any questions so far.
Yeah, you have to only check the question answers now. Because since I am in full screen mode, I won't be able to check them. So
No, I
your question answers in the question answer box. If you have any, and okay. So Sanju, you would like to unmute yourself, or would you like to write your question? I can maybe. I have allowed you to talk also. You can unmute yourself as well. Sanju, if you want to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself, or you can write your question. Okay, so the question is, what does sequencer compatible DNA fragment mean?
DNA fragment?
What does sequencer compatible DNA fragment mean?
Okay. So as I told you that there are different methods in which we develop a library. Each sequencing platform has its own chemistry. For example, the Illumina chemistry is that it does sequencing by synthesis. The other one, the solid platform, it has basis of emulsion PCR based sequencing. So you have to follow the protocols to make your DNA or the sequence DNA that you want to sequence. You have to make it compatible with it. So if you take a cluster generated on by a bridge amplification to a solid platform, it will not work there, because the chemistries of each platform is developed in a certain way. However, the basic principle of sequencing is same in all, but the different chemistries operate. Some have a flow cell mode, some have a 96 well plate mode to do the working. So you have to make your libraries, or you have to modulate your DNA in such a way that you make it usable at that platform. That is what I mean by sequencer compatible DNA fragments. So depending on the sequencing technology you have access to, you have to design the library in that manner.
Okay, so any more questions? Any more questions? I don't see any other question. Participants, you can unmute yourself. I've put most of you in a, I've allowed you to speak. So you can unmute yourself and ask the questions directly also. So fine, now let's move on to the presentation.
Sure, Dikshit. Okay, so as I told you, the limitation of all these technologies so far is there are two caveats to this. That the number of reads the nucleotides read at a one length is limited, up to 450 or 500 bases in one stretch. The other problem sometimes comes in from the clonal amplification process that we are doing. So there is a chance of induction of PCR duplicates there, repetitive regions being left out, or there could, because clonal amplification is a normal PCR process, there could be errors induced due to that. So what people slowly started to think is to devise ways in which you do not have to make copies or do not have to do clonal amplification, that is PCR amplifying your libraries, to avoid those problems. So now what we are moving into the era of long read sequencing. So this provides both the benefits that in one go you are only sequencing your DNA molecules which were originally made just as a library. There is no clonal amplification step in between. Second, that you can read up to n number. There is no limit of bases to which your DNA can be read. You can stop the reaction as and per your requirement. So next slide, Diksha. So one of the most convenient, the most, I will say, a very, very compatible, a very, very sophisticated technology has been developed by Oxford University, and that we call as the nanopore technologies. It is very mobile, very, very light. It is just like a slide. You just have to attach it with a USB to your system, to your laptop, and you can do the sequencing. So it is no cumbersome, there is no heavy technology, no heavy machines tagged to it, and you can achieve this. The initial cost of procuring this is quite high, but the advantages are plenty. So what happens in the nanopore technology is that DNA can be sequenced by threading it through a microscopic pore in a membrane. Bases are identified by the way they affect ions flowing through the pore from one side of the membrane to the other. So what happens is there are small membranes or small pores which are embedded in membrane. Like you can see in the figure, there are small pores, very minute nano particle size pores, and which are embedded in a membrane. So n number of pores, millions of pores are embedded on a membrane surface. What happens is, so it exploits the uh, potential of change in electric intensity to capture the events. So what it does is that you have your double DNA library here. You have your double helix library. It goes inside. It is unwound by a mixture of enzymes. So one protein unzips the DNA helix into the two strands. So a second protein creates a pore in the membrane and holds the adapter molecule. Now what happens during the library preparation for this method? To the DNA molecules, what we do is we attach a tether. We call it as a tether to the DNA molecules. It is again a synthetic moiety which goes and binds to the DNA, which will help in anchoring the DNA when it passes through the pore. Because so this is what it mentions here: a second protein creates a pore in the membrane and holds the adapter molecule, that is the tether that we have attached. It will go and bind to that complementary system and your DNA can flow through this. As you know, so as the molecules pass through it, there is a DNTP pool also, which will go and keep incorporating and read by the detector based on the based on the changes in the current level. So when each dinucleotide is incorporated, there is some change in the current intensities, which is recorded by the super sensitive detectors. Okay, so we go to, so this is how nanopore technology works. There is no limitation of the sequence that you can, there is no sequence length, no 500 base pair. You can even do up to 3 kb in one go. So there is more confidence on the data. There is no clonal amplification led biases. So this is now becoming very popular among the scientists, among clinicians for their regular use. And the idea is that you can keep reusing these pores, these channels, n number of times. So they provide a buffer, they provide some reagents by which you can clean after your sequencing run and reuse them for the next set of run. Next slide, Diksha. So there are several versions of it. MiniION, which is a portable sequencer. You can see the image. It is so small. It currently, a beta version is being tested in approximately 500 labs. And the accuracy is high. The first report, so you can see 79 kb of bases could be read on one go. So this is the advantage of using this system. The other ones, so here you can run in MiniION, you can run only one library at one time. They are also developing the higher versions where you can learn, you can load at least 8 or 48 libraries in one go. So that would increase the high throughput of the system, and you can gain more data in one go. You can have more advantage over the other systems. So next slide, Disha. Yeah, so this is a slide from the Oxford nanopore thing only. So there's no the advantages are there's no constraint for read length. They are small and portable. The library preparation is very easy. It takes only 1 hour to 2 hours to do so. It is fastest and cheapest version available these days, and it is highly accurate by sequencing both the strands. So you can use your genomic DNA, amplified genomic DNA, that means your PCR products, your PCR amplicons and cDNAs through the nanopore technology. You can have the sequencing. The analysis is also very easy. There are softwares available. You put your data into it and you get the data out. You get the results out within a matter of few days. Next slide, Diksha. Now, when we are done with the sequencing, so the wet lab part is done. Now, what do we do with the amount of data that is being thrown by the sequencer on us? Like how to make sense of this massive amount of data that we have. So Diksha is very good at doing that. I'll just brief you that what are the basic steps or what are the basic infrastructure that is required along with a sequencer. And as the sequencing technology is evolving, so is the bioinformatics system also, because if we don't upgrade that, then there is no fun of doing or fun of advancing our sequencers. So yeah, a lot of data is available and we should know how to make best use of it. So yeah, there is a need for larger amount of CPU power. So they must manage compute clusters, big compute clusters. There are challenges in parallelizing existing software or redesigning of algorithms to work in a parallel environment. And then the files that are generated are very huge. You'll need a lot of space to store them, although the analyzed files are much smaller and can be accommodated on a normal desktop that is available in a laboratory. But to do the computing and reach to that stage, you definitely require a big infrastructure, and you need sequence quality filtering. So the bioinformatician or whosoever is doing the analysis need to be very well versed with understanding the outputs from a sequencer and how to arrange for the infrastructure and resources to make sense of that data. Next slide. In NGS, we have to process really big amounts of data, in which is not trivial in computing terms. Big NGS projects require supercomputing infrastructures. Nowadays, people are also taking help of cloud spaces. Several platforms are also, like Illumina is also providing their own computing facilities, like for example your Dragon system that they have introduced, which can analyze one whole genome analysis in half an hour. So this kind of help is also being developed. The bioinformatic tools are also so developed. Otherwise, when you do whole genome sequencing in a normal fashion with the normal computing facility that you have in your institute, then it might take up to a week to analyze one single human genome. But at current pace, when things like Dragon are available, you can finish it in half an hour. Although they are definitely very, very expensive, but once you procure them, the life is very easy. So it's not so small facilities, I will say, or small institutions must carefully choose their projects to be scaled with their computing capabilities. So when we are planning sequencing, we don't have to just plan for the kits and the DNA and the source that we have to do it. We also have to think beyond that towards the analysis part, that how it will be carried. So I think Diksha is doing a very good job there. She's like supporting and reaching out to people and which do not have sufficient access to the analysis facility to help them out. So what are the basic applications of using NGS? We can do whole genome sequencing. We can do understand gene regulations by RNA sequencing or exome sequencing or small RNA sequencing. We can understand epigenetic changes by doing cut and tag, cut and run protocols, ChIP-seq protocols, your bisulfite methyl sequencing, all these methods. Metagenomics, that is metagenomics when we try to understand of the bacterial genomes and smaller genomes, that or some data which is already available to us. Paleogenomics is of the ancient, the fossils and all that we get DNA from that. We can do paleogenomics from that. So transcriptome analysis is the more or less same as understanding gene regulation and resequencing. So next slide, Diksha. Now, where does our future with NGS hold? What does NGS promise us, and why should we be looking so forward to it? So during the last 5 years, next generation sequencing has transitioned from research to clinical use, and being into the core facility of clinical cancer research, I can definitely authenticate this, that yes, now it is happening. Not only we as scientists and we as we have collaborations, and clinicians are getting more and more interested in understanding the data, that because they want to follow a personalized healthcare approach. So to understand that, we need to understand the tiny or minute changes in across patients that are there, which so even a small mutation, a single base mutation, can make you resistant to a drug, to a therapy for cancer, and others might take that therapy well, and one person reacts well to the drug, the other does not. So to understand these differences, clinicians are bothered a lot, and they are turning to us to understand this through NGS. They are providing us clinical tissue, clinical data, and they are requesting us to look at it, that what is causing the therapy to fail, what is the differences, and that can only be understood when we do a multi-omics kind of study facilitated by the next generation sequencing platforms. And at least 14 countries have created initiatives to sequence large populations. And it is projected that more than 60 million people worldwide will have their genome sequenced by 2025. The recent times we are living in, the COVID times, the mutations, the COVID mutants that we are able to identify at such a fast pace is because of the NGS help that we are having. So if you want to understand the mutant variants, or why you want to plan a personalized therapy approach, or even if you want to understand your basic science, you want to do de novo genome sequencing, understand new genomes, then NGS is the way to look up to. So yeah, that is all from my side. I'm welcome to questions now. Any questions, any thought process, any projects you guys or your lab is looking up to, we are there to help you.
So thank you, Dr. Ankita, for this amazing webinar. I'm sure the participants have gained so many insights about what all can be done, what all is there, which platform to use, when to use, what is the raw data that we get, and of course about the sequencing chemistries as well. So the platform is now open for questions. So we have a question from Sanju, that how does NGS helps in cancer research? Can you brief about it?
Yeah, sure, Sanju. So as I said that I day in day out work towards it. So for example, there are mutations. So NGS helps us in identifying patients. For example, I will say there are breast cancer patients, which the Western world says that a lot of BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations are noted in their patients. So what happened is, in India also, without doing any such analysis, we started giving treatment to our patients for the BRCA1, BRCA2 thing, assuming that our Indian population is also carrying those mutations in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. But of late, after several years now, we realize that the incidence of BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations is only, say, 6% in our population, maximum 28% in our population. If I talk of different regions of India, so it is as low as 6% to 28% also. So there we were making a blunder by blindly giving those medications to the patients. What now is facilitated by NGS is to discover new targets. For example, when we do, so I'll tell you, when we do whole genome sequencing, so we have now identified several new mutations which are unique to the Indian population. And a medication has to be developed, and multiple drug trials have started in that direction using that data. A lot of studies still needs to be put into that direction, but basics have started by realizing the mistakes that we are doing in blindly following different culture results. Another approach, the next generation sequencing is helping in, for example, the single cell sequencing, or the single spatial transcriptomics. So a lot of focus in cancer research these days in developing immunotherapy targets, because we have now understood by different research in different patients that the amount of T cell infiltration in solid tumors is a huge determinant of understanding that how a cancer would, what prognosis would a patient have essentially. So if there is more T cell infiltration, the more the T cells have infiltrated inside, or the more deep they have infiltrated inside solid tumors, the better will be the prognosis, because we can treat them with immune checkpoint inhibitors. But so these kind of analysis, when we are doing it in patients, like my lab is doing it, so we see that there are patients who have a high immune infiltration, and those who have very poor infiltration of T cells. So as soon as we see that there is very poor infiltration of T cells into those patients, then we know that the prognosis for this patient is not right, won't be right if we give immune checkpoints to that, inhibitors to that patient, because T cell ही नहीं है वहां पर, तो how will the therapy work? So to understand these, and then a different line of treatment is chosen for such patients, and a regular follow-up is more keenly noted for such patients. So such kind of advances have been helped by NGS to reach to these conclusions and to understand the tumor microenvironment in a better way. We have also understood by exosome sequencing and all that there are different in a tumor microenvironment. A better understanding of tumor microenvironment has been gained by doing these kind of sequencing, because we can identify that what cell types are present, what kind of cargo is carried by exosome and being released to the other neighboring cells. So yes, I would say NGS is playing a massive role. It is expensive, no doubt, but the amount of information it delivers, if the experiment is done in a right fashion, it is a precious information. For the patient, it's precious.
Okay, so that actually answered not just this question, but so many other queries as well. I think many participants had so many queries, but I don't see any other questions so far. If you have any questions, feel free to write that down here. You can also unmute yourself, raise your virtual hand, and we can unmute you. Um, I don't see any more questions. Okay, there's one question here. So, what are the active areas in research currently?
Active areas of which research? Like
In NGS research areas, research areas in NGS.
I would say majorly disease biology is a growing, blooming field for NGS to be used into.
Especially personalized medicine.
Personalized.
Okay, that's unique.
Yeah, be it diabetes, be it any cardiac disability, be it any cancer, so any liver chronic disease. So a lot of disease-oriented labs and clinicians are now turning face to NGS to understand what the actual scenario is at the infection site or at the cancer site.
Nowadays, COVID sequencing is also
Yeah.
that is one of the main things. That's
Yes.
So, Reema is asking, what are read depths?
So read depth, yeah. So read depth is, I will say, okay, how do I explain it? So when you do sequencing, what will happen is we have generated small fragments for our DNA. We fragmented our DNA to produce the library. Now, when we sequence that, the sequencers, when we are processing the DNA in our lab, we are doing multiple, it is not that we are taking only one molecule of each DNA or each entity that is being represented in that sample. So there are multiple copies of DNA existing in that sample that we isolated from the source. We have fragmented that, and for example, a region called A to B, a region from A to B in the DNA, it is now going to be sequenced, but it is coming from so many different cells and from so many. We have multiple molecules for A to B. Now, when we sequence it, say for 500 bases or so that means we can get up to 500 or 200 copies for the same sequence. So the sequences will amplify from, for example, A to B is we get 200 hits, which will align to different regions of A to B. So that is called as the read depth. So how many times a DNA sequence has been read by the sequencer is called the read depth of the instrument. Getting my point?
Okay, so basically, it gives you a confidence.
Yes, it gives you the confidence. Yeah.
So
the higher the read depth, the more confident you are that the identified differences or identified mutation or identified fold change is actually a factual thing and no false positive.
In fact, I would say not the identification of the variation, but identification of the exact base at that position.
Yes.
So that confidence increases when you have much higher read depth. Of course, read depth, getting higher read depths comes with a higher cost as well. Because the more read depth, for more deep depth, you have to get more number of sequences, the GBs of data will increase and the cost will increase. So you have to balance that out. So if you are, for example, your objective is identifying variations. So you have to be 100% sure of the exact base which is there. So you will need to have a very high, not exactly very high, but yeah, good amount of read depth. But if, for example, you are not interested in variations and your objective is to identify, let's say, gene expressions, you are doing an RNA sequence analysis. So a lower read depth can also work for you. But that doesn't mean that okay, very small read depth will work. So it is always it's also always related that what exactly are you looking for based on your objectives.
Right.
So now next we have a question from Suhasini that can you please elaborate on pyro sequencing?
Okay, so pyrosequencing is another method. It again makes use of sequencing by synthesis. It involves taking a single strand of DNA to be sequenced and then synthesizing its complementary strand by making use of different types of enzymes. So this method is based on detecting the activity of DNA polymerase with another chemiluminescent enzyme. So that is tagged along, as I mentioned earlier. So essentially, this method allows sequencing a single strand of DNA by synthesizing the complementary strand one base at a time and detecting which base was actually added at each step. So the template DNA, we immobilize it on a solid surface. The solutions of DNTPs, that is A, T, G, and C, are sequentially added and then removed from the reaction. Light is generated in the form of luminescence only when the nucleotide solution complements the first unpaired base of the template. So the sequence of solutions which produce chemiluminescent signals, they allow the determination of the template sequence. So this is how a pyrosequencing works. Understand?
Yeah, it was quite clear to me. I hope Suhasini got her answer. And any more questions, participants? I don't see any more questions now, Ankita.
Yeah.
So I think now it's time for to end this wonderful webinar. And because I myself got so much of clarity in different terms because I'm not a experimental biologist myself, and then we get to hear this from a very experienced person like you, Ankita. I'm sure that the participants have all thoroughly enjoyed. I saw that many of the participants who have registered have not joined today. I know because we so that's the drawback of sharing the recordings, that people think that okay, we'll just see the recording and let's not join the live webinar. But what you miss out are these question answer sessions. You are not able to ask the questions to the speaker. So this is what you are missing out. And I would request through this medium that if you are registering for a webinar, because there were so many participants and I don't see hardly a few have joined in today. I request everyone to please join in for the live webinar. It also boosts the morale of the speaker, and you'll also get an opportunity to ask questions to the speaker directly. And if in case anybody who's not joined here, or even the participants who are here, if you have any more question, feel free to write it to us, and we'll be happy to take your questions to Dr. Ankita. And also, we'll be happy to if you have any other request of any other webinar or any other course, any other internship that you are interested or looking for, just let us know. We'll be very much happy to cater to your requests. So with that note, I would like to end this webinar, and thank you so much, Ankita, for your time.
Thank you,
And
Diksha. It was really nice to be a part of this. And I hope I have helped people gain some insights into it. And I'll be happy if people want to discuss their projects that they are thinking of developing or using these NGS into their experimental approaches. And you can approach anytime.
yeah, and if you are looking for any experimental consultation, we'll be happy to have Dr. Ankita's insights in for that. So we'll be so if you have looking for any project consultations, we have other like Dr. Ankita, we have so many other experimental biologists whose insights we can take for your projects as well. So with that note, I would like to end this webinar. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much, Dr. Ankita.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye. Take care.